Hi all, I'd like to do a set of videos about how two Russian projects succeed or failed in their influence on chess thinking. And these two Russian projects, basically Kotov's Think Like a Grandmaster, a catchy title was given to a book, which I believe actually was a project given to Kotov to see if humans could think like computers. And the other project, which I think was kind of mentioned as a joke, was by Kotov, himself, when he said Botvinnik, had been given, doing research work into, a sort of information-based approach to writing computer programs to make them think more like humans. So Kotov's book was kind of the reverse approach. And as a backdrop to sort of waffling on about this, I'm going to choose one of Kotov's games at the peak of his powers, 1962 against John Littlewood in the Hastings Congress, which is topical because Hastings is at the moment. So this Kotov has written, one of the best-selling books of all time called Think Like a Grandmaster. And he's basically emphasizing what I think is something really wrong, which is this separation between assessment and planning and calculation, as if calculation is completely devoid of feeding back to the hypotheses that you've created when you assess and plan in your thinking. I think the two are mixed, and other writers have emphasized this, like Tisdall, that there's a mixture of verbal reasoning, always with the mechanical if-then type thinking. By the way, Kotov was playing white here against John Littlewood, and it was quite a positional opening, the English opening. So this isn't like a harsh tactical game that you'd expect from someone who's mastered this art of analysis, this sort of computer-like maze of variation trees. If you look at Kotov's games with the white pieces in Hastings 1962 Congress, this is definite evidence, I think, that Kotov was actually quite a positional grandmaster. The same, with Karpov, who won off Fischer by default. These are positional Russian grandmasters. It's not as though they've all of a sudden gone into this mode of if-then type analysis trees. You can see from their games that the emphasis is on positional play and reinforcing d5 as you would with white in the English opening. And actually, after knight bd7, we see a concept which has been alluded to, by Joe Roby Chess recently, the pincer attack. So both bishops are going to be fianchettoed. So we have the pincer model, being demonstrated with the English opening. There's the c4 pawn being used, to reinforce white's control of d5. But there's basic, fundamental positional strategy being evidenced in this game and all of Kotov's games. In fact, as black, he's been playing in this tournament g6 as black, the modern, and perhaps he knew the the latest wrinkles in that as far as opening theory are concerned. So anyway, basically, the reason this has bugged me, that someone basically, when I talked about the exploitable knight outposts, to actually, use the word exploitable when you judge, which knight outpost is better. For me, that's kind of this marriage of looking at knight outposts, not from just how they look, but how the dynamic considerations are kind of married with the static considerations. And the two Russian projects which I think you can deduce that were given to Botvinnik and Kotov, basically they kind of were extremely fundamentally flawed from the outset, because how can the computer programs think like humans? It was doomed, and Kasparov sort of highlighted that project was doomed because brute force took over. The engines and computers generally, they became faster and faster at brute force, so there was less and less need for the evaluation function. Although modern engines like Rybka, they're ahead of the other engines because their evaluation function is better. But the primary thing that they all share is this brute force approach, not a kind of knowledge-based system approach. So that's how Botvinnik's project kind of never really took off, because even in the end games, which are sort of simple scenarios, you don't even need a knowledge-based system, you just need table bases, and they cover up to 6 pieces, so you just get gigabytes and gigabytes of table-based data information, and you don't need to create this knowledge-based system. You just store all the the winning routes. So from any position, you know that this is the way to play, and you can determine if the position's won or not. So anyway, Kotov played knight d2 here. As I say, this game's just a backdrop for this discussion. That basically there were these two Russian projects, one by Kotov and one given to Botvinnik, I believe, and there were kind of extreme ideas, like experimental ideas. Could you get humans to play like computers? So that was the Kotovian project. Or could you get computers to think like humans, which is the Botvinnik project? And both of them are kind of perverse, because really the strength of humans is intuition. It's not really calculation. Magnus Carlsen has said in a recent interview, when asked, how many moves do you calculate ahead? Sometimes 15 or 20, he says, but the trick, he says, is in the evaluation. So there isn't a divorced separation that Kotov implies, straight in his initial pages, that the Grandmaster, carries out this assessment of the position, this vague assessment of where would he like his knights. As we swing from my knight outpost choose, even that, if you don't carry with it the cynicism of, what knight outposts are exploitable or not, then, you might as well just be talking a load of waffle. Yeah, or where do you want your rooks, or where do you want your bishops? These all need to be factoring in then and there in the assessment of position of whether they're effective or not. Otherwise, why bother to test those hypotheses? You're just wasting your time when you can just factor out immediately, that there might only be one reasonable knight outpost or one reasonable place to put the rooks, because other places, your king's going to get blown to bits, or you're going to lose material. So there's actually far less candidate places to put your bits in an intuitive manner, and that can all be ruled out very quickly just by asking some dynamic considerations. How is the opponent going to exploit that? So knight g4 here was played by John Littlewood, who, by the way, was one of England's greatest attacking players. He passed away, unfortunately, this year. He played in the British Championship. I'd seen him at the British Championship, and he was a great attacking player. And I think, unfortunately, he'll be most remembered, actually, coincidentally, by one of his losses to Mikhail Botvinnik, where it was as a dragon, and he seemed to have this crushing attack, but Botvinnik played a very highly cunning tactical move, and his attack was refuted. I might try and show you that game actually in the next video or two. But anyway, so we've got here these characters, Botvinnik and Kotov, and we've got the Cold War context, and I believe they were given these just weird projects to sort of investigate, and for some reason the book, Kotov's book, was entitled Think Like a Grandmaster, and I really believe it was just to make it a bestseller, that it had the credibility of Kotov, who was one of the top Russian players, probably a world champion candidate, so it had his name credibility, but the actual content of it was really echoing this project. How could we play like computers? Can we really just go past these first two stages of assessing and creating a plan, and then just go into this routine sort of computer-like if-then stuff? And everything, in my experience, tells me that this is just total nonsense. That, if without this integrated view, that when you do a calculation, you're testing, is your plan effective or not? Without that integrated view, it just seems to me, total nonsense, really. That we can reduce our thinking to this, like if-then, mazes. And it was in Kotov's, next book that, in the way of the introduction, he kind of apologised for this, saying that, maybe he did put too much emphasis on calculation. Anyway, here we reach a sharp position. So John Littlewood has just played knight c5 against Kotov. Of course, Kotov sees that if he takes, then rook takes b2, and that's sort of unpleasant. So he plays queen d1, and he sets a tactical trap for John Littlewood, that rook takes b4, there's knight d5, and then attacking e7 and the rook, and e7 would fork the queen and king. So there is some tactical awareness. Bishop g4, and the position is getting even sharper. And now white leaves the queen and pre just to carry out this knight d5, because he thinks he'll be better after it. Black plays bishop takes b2, because he's also left his bishop and pre. And now white just gently moves his queen forward. After playing first the check to attack the queen, he just moves his queen to attack the bishop. And if the queen moves, then it will be queen takes b2 check. So this was kind of a tense tactical position, which maybe, the tree of analysis, the if-thens would have excelled in. But notice all the positional play before that. It was a quiet opening. It wasn't an e4 opening. So knight takes c8, bishop f6, and so Kotov's won the queen. But black has, material imbalance. But white is actually clearly better here, according to Rybka. So knight e4, rook fd8, and Kotov consolidates now. Queen c2 attacking that knight on a4. So black takes on b4. But that's a kind of positional sack, because now, to get rid of the dark square bishop, it weakens black's king a bit further. And now after a3, this a4 knight is vulnerable. So rook b2, he picks up the a4 knight, and it's all over really. Rook d2. Okay, there's some threat to deal with, but queen a8, a very nice accurate move, maybe more accurate than queen c6. Or maybe queen c6 would have done the job as well, or something else. So queen a8, and after bishop d1,